Thank you. Thanks for the introduction. I think you're right. We live in a hybrid area, both as profession, both as the world we live in. And I've always found that incredibly fascinating, that when we can sort of conclude that when we look at reality today, the children of today, they're not playing with marbles or with Barbie dolls so much, but they're sitting behind the screen via Facebook, via MSN. So what you see in a way is that our world is sort of shifting from analog to digital, in which technology is becoming more and more our second language in a way, our second skin. And I've always found that fascinating within the architectural field, that on one hand it seems that our current world is sort of becoming more and more generic, the same shopping streets, the same boring Louis Vuitton, Prada stores everywhere, and that it feels that we rather connect to some kind of virtual world, a cloud somewhere up there via Facebook or Twitter, to which we connect our emotions much more. So we live in this weird state of schizophrenia perhaps, between the virtual and the analog. And I've always found it fascinating to think about what happens when this social technology jumps out of that computer screen and becomes a part of our urban environment, of our landscape, of our body in a way. And what does that mean for the designer slash architect slash inventor of today? What I want to do today is sort of do two things. One hand, show you sort of the different type of poetic installations we've been working on in the last 3 to 4 years. But on the other hand, I want to talk a bit about how you survive in an architectural arena within today, between beauty and bullshit, between creativity and commerce. You are looking to make your personal statement and your personal satisfaction, and how do you deal with that? How do you hack it in a way? When you look at landscape in a way, the way what surrounds us, I always became fascinated because in a way for me it's about customization, personalization in space. In the same way as a boy, you hack nature, you build tree huts, you make cables between trees and slide over it. So you're very accustomed to sort of morph reality towards your imagination. And maybe sort of this motivation remains the same, but our tools sort of evolve, and to create something poetic and to make an engagement with reality again. Studio Roosegaarde, because this is not me being in an attic with some great ideas, sitting alone, stuff like that. I think it's more related to the Rembrandt and the Rubens, groups of people like the architectural studios operating today, with different disciplines working together on some kind of gesamt artwork, so to speak. So here you see the studio in Rotterdam, a 500 square meter, where half of them are more architects and designers, and the other half are more the whiz kids, so to speak, the software and the electronic engineers, and they work very intensively together in terms of prototyping and engineering. And indeed, we sort of launched the second studio in Shanghai to sort of expand this kind of project. We talk a bit about this later. A painter has paint, an architect has bricks, or SolidWorks or Top Solid. We have our own little microchip system. This is a great tool which we develop ourselves. So what you see here is actually sort of a mini computer. So it's not a Windows embedded or Mac or Arduino set. This is what we use to express the emotions that we have in our brain. So a little thick microchip in the middle, we flash the code in it, different types of sensors, and that allows us to make the things that I'll show you right now. One of the first pieces actually that we did was June. Indeed, after graduating Berlage and realizing I could never survive within the structure of the current architectural offices like OMA and MVRDV, with all due respect, by the way, I felt I wanted to make things which would become more alive somehow, to sort of use technology to create some kind of connectivity again with reality. And we got an opportunity in this case to sort of update a pedestrian tunnel in Rotterdam for the Architectural Biennale, where they invited us to sort of give people a new perception of how their city could look like. And we choose this context, which is the Maas Tunnel, under the river Maas, which goes over it. which it was built in 1942, 1943. At that time, a sort of a high point of innovation. Thank you. High point of innovation, but at this time horribly outdated, with a lot of guards and cleaning ladies to keep it running, so to speak. And we thought it was a fascinating place to sort of add a second layer to sort of enhance this architectural experience. And I'll show you a bit what happens when sort of social media jumps out of the computer screen and becomes part of our built environment. So it was placed actually within a couple of hours, the first few days, without any sign or whatever, so people had no idea what they were experiencing. We filmed it from above. So here you see June reacts to you, lights up when you walk by. So it's still very gentle, very soft. But of course the thing has a mind of its own, so to speak, reacting to the voices. And I like that somehow it's a mirror reacting to what people are doing, and sometimes here it's a display. It's still a little bit hectic of all the sounds, but slowly it's becoming more quiet. So it's sort of an extension, but at the same time it's a provocation. It tries to mediate between people here. And you've got these lines of light. I mean, the goal is of these kind of pieces are to create new types of social interactions, and not so much to be a glorification of technology. Yeah. And what was interesting for us, I think, to place it not so much in the comfort zone of the white cubes of the museums that came actually later, but to place it within a setting publicly, where people had no particular reference, where people could also touch it. That was actually part of the artwork, and to sort of make them feel that reality is not a static thing, this sum of walls, doors, and windows. But it's more that something that relates to you, that connects to you on an emotional level. So we placed it there for several months. People could enter it 24 hours per day, free entrance. And this started to generate all these different types of activities. And that's, I think, one of the most interesting things when you talk about interactive systems. On one hand, it's about me and my techno-poetry, my desire to make these kind of living things. But for example, the city of Rotterdam supported this project because it was about safety. Where you walk, there's light, so the rest is... So it was a sort of a detector, so people felt more safe within the tunnel. A big electricity company supported it because it was about smart lighting, where you walk, it's light, and the rest is off, etc. These are not the reasons why we make these kind of things, but they sort of help they plug in an ideology and help to realize a project. But one of the most, I think, obscure things which happened was that June became this weird hotspot for wedding couples. I did not know this, but as a confirmed bachelor, when you get married, there are these websites where you can go to select the spot where you want to have your wedding photo taken, architecturally speaking. And June was on the top one for several months within the Netherlands. So you should imagine that you have this dark, grey, empty tunnel, which is suddenly hacked by these tens of wedding couples coming and going, and June reacts to them, having their photos taken. And they started sending me these photos, which on one hand are, of course, horrible, horrible quiche. But on the other hand, of course, beautiful, because it's their moment, it reacts to what they're doing. But what was interesting is that sort of these are the stories that the guards, I live nearby, still tell me, so you can sort of enhance this activity within a space. And I thought that was extremely interesting. With June, and as a young creative studio, suddenly we got a lot of requests in a way. Can you kill the reverb on the mic? Or can you kill the reverb on the mic? Or I have an echo. Yeah. like this, because I'm going. Cheers. Yeah, this is better. Yeah, we're good. Within the setting of a young creative company, we got a lot of requests for June to be exhibited. It became a weird hit online. This was early 2007, when a lot of digital art or new media was still related to very expensive flash websites for commercial companies. I don't know if you recognize that still, but it was something at that moment very on. And so we became sort of fond to sort of extend this idea beyond the initial location of the Maas Tunnel. So we promised ourselves in a way to sort of not copy-paste it, but to copy-morph this idea and to start to intervene with different architectural settings, from museums to pedestrian tunnels to churches. And we became sort of fond of our Dutch pragmatism. We are poets, but in the same way we are interested in pragmatism, in the same way as you are, to extend these ideas that you have. So we made in such a way that June is a modular system, 1 meter by 50 centimeters, with its own industrial plug, microchip, sensor, microphone, etc., 10 meter in a crate, shippable and billable. And it started to sort of travel through the world, in which every time we looked at a specific context, in an architectural way or in a cultural way, and changed the way it behaved, sometimes more relating to touch, sometimes relating more to sound, sometimes relating to time. In Europe, there's sometimes a sort of sentiment towards technology, that they say, it's not really necessary, and there was a time when we didn't need it anymore, which I don't think is actually true, but anyways. And in a city like Hong Kong or Shanghai, where people grew up with the Tamagotchis under their pillow, they have a completely different understanding with tech in that way. And I find that extremely fascinating. So we sort of copy-morphed it from, in the Tate Modern, the museums woke up for the social, thinking how can you use space and time and tech to create new types of interaction with people, more on a social way. Hong Kong in the city hall, where the children would come back every day with more and more friends and mimic, after a while, the sounds of June in order to communicate with each other. So instead of actually talking in Chinese, they would copy the sounds of June in order I actually don't know what they did, but it was sort of this complete embracement of this artificial landscape. To them, it was actually the new natural. And here, very nice setting. It took us quite some time to get a license for this one, placed in the church where the latest Harry Potter was recorded. We put a 30-meter strip in a cathedral which is still being used, an old cloister in Durham in the United Kingdom, where the choir children are still performing every day. And it became this weird, almost spiritual element where the kids, the choir children shouted at each other like, follow the light, or you have to believe in it. So it's a completely different understanding of what's going on there. We found that fascinating. And also here, the relationship with the building. There was a time when the priest was telling a story to the audience, but in Latin, and probably nobody could understand it, so what they did very smart was the stainless windows. The architecture was telling stories, biblical stories, which I found, which is, I think, an interesting anecdote. Maybe in a way, this kind of installation like June are trying to do the same thing, but then you are God. You can interact, you can create your own story with your environment. And maybe to go back a bit, because I don't want to sound too much like a futurist and a microchip in my muesli addict. This obsession with the landscape has been with me from day one. As a child, you play with tree huts and things like that. But I found out after a while that there's a more historical reference. There's a book written by Helle S. Haas, a Dutch author, about Heren van de Thee, Lords of the Tea. Long time ago, Netherlands, Indonesia. Indonesia was a Dutch colony from the Netherlands, and a lot of Dutch people went there to grow tea. And I was in a neighborhood because we had an exhibition in Jakarta, and I visit the plantage that they still have there, and they are also they died there, so their grave is still there. And when I was sitting in a taxi, something incredibly sort of happened. What you see here. So you have, when you drive in Indonesia, there's always this incredible amount of jungle, wild, rough space. But suddenly when you go towards this plantage, structure starts hitting in, because they made these lines for irrigation, to water the plants. So what they did in a way, I realized that in the taxi on my way, is they were hacking the landscape. They were this display of structure and chaos in order to make a machine, a tea machine. So you here see the paths and the lines in it. Local population. And maybe something deep inside me sort of triggers me when I work on new projects. After a lot of exhibitions with June, which helped us actually to make things more sensitive and more poetic, we got the call, which in a way we were pushing for a long time, to make a permanent version of June, to go for the long-term interaction. And the location sort of popped up in a dike in Rotterdam in the Netherlands, besides the River Maas. Sea level is rising because of CO2, etc., etc. So they have to build a new dike, 100 meter more land inwards. What cows are in India are dikes in Netherlands. They're holy. You cannot drill or do anything on top of it. But suddenly the status of this dike was gone, and we got a chance to sort of make our type of intervention. And this project was particular because there were actually sort of two sides pushing it. One was actually local inhabitants. Oh, we have a party. Yeah. One group was local inhabitants, which actually saw June in The Hague somewhere and decided that they wanted to have it in their backyard. They have a path here on this dike where they walk with their little dog or get some fresh air every evening. And it's populated with pensioned people who have a lot of free time. So they started to harass the city of Rotterdam that they wanted to have it there. And in the beginning you think, yeah, like, okay, yeah, whatever, everybody wants that. But they were quite persistent, so to speak. And at the same time, June became more on the mental map, and city became interested to purchase it for their art collection. So we started to make actually a sort of new version, which is waterproof, vandalism proof, this kind of SimCity blocks. And this is actually sort of the sum of all. 60 meter June permanently placed besides the River Maas. If you take the 1 hour flight, you can go there in the evening for free and have your walk of light. Filmed from above, from the inhabitants. So there are little cricket sounds in it when you walk by. And also here, it has a mind of its own. Sometimes it's ignoring you a bit and then catching up again. And in the beginning people said, oh, it doesn't work. And they were like, no. So we programmed these sort of ghosts of light, which on one hand sometimes are passive and sort of go along, but sometimes ignore or become more hectic, more thinking. Just reacting to motion, touch and sound and that way. And I think one of there are two reasons why this kind of artwork sort of function as a hub within Rotterdam. One is that, how do I say this, is that we installed the installation 1 week before the opening 3 years ago. And that was actually the moment that night was when it was people tried to vandalize it, tried to break it. But the moment we put it on, it was sort of alive for people. And actually the neighborhood people started to take care of it. So we had some young children trying to take one home, and they were dragged out by the pensionate people by their ears and put in some kind of basement nobody knows about. So people sort of got engaged with it because it was sort of alive, quote unquote. Plus, because it's our own tech and design, towards the city you provide a maintenance contract, a sort of service contract for 10, 20, 30 years, which on one hand allows you control about what's going on, and secondly also to check what's going on, to change or update the moods, to give it some kind of emotional check every year. And I think that that's interesting, to have this some kind of long-term relationship with the piece itself. I think you cannot talk about interactivity and future and not include sustainability. This project in particular had one of the bottlenecks, because there was no power cable and things like that. There was one of the bottlenecks was where we would get the electricity from and who would pay for it. And I'm not sure if you have experience within operating with cities, but they are sometimes incredibly bureaucratic, and although sitting next to each other are experts in non-communication. So this became a sort of, the project manager went mad and was like, okay, I cannot make this happen because everybody's pointing to someone else. So what we did was sort of overrule that scenario and reinvent June, and made it in such a way that 60 meter would only use 60 watts, shut down 5 street lamps on that path, which were there already, and make it in such a way that the whole dune would only use the power of half a street lamp. Therefore, the city of Rotterdam gained electricity of 4.5 street lamps, and then the go was decided within 4 weeks. So it sort of shows that as an artist, sometimes you have to rely on your poetic arguments, and sometimes on your super pragmatic arguments, and you have to negotiate between it. And I think that's good. I think that's interesting. So we've been working on actually a lot, producing a lot of pieces. We got zillions of requests to make June in color, which we can do, but we won't, because it's boring. That's also, if you want to create value, a really important thing to say no a lot. That really helps, because usually the good clients come back. So this is one of the projects, I don't have time for it to go in depth, to go beyond the LED and to go more towards an architectural surface. Flow, what you see here, is a sort of wall made out of hundreds of ventilators rotating when you hold your hand nearby. So it sort of becomes this pixel which change in gradients and the hot air or the cold air in your face. For the first time placed in the grid architecture from Richard Meyer in City Hall The Hague. And he has a white grid, so we made a dark purple. Okay, so hold this sort of this ghost of fans which starts to follow you. About it has no sound, so it's very slim. All the sensors and the technology is sort of submerged within it, and some people are completely obsessed by it, and other people just walk by and look at it and continue. What we notice is that people on both sides of the wall, suddenly the moment they rotate, the van becomes sort of transparent, so to speak. They started to talk with each other. It's like it almost seems in a time like this we need an interface in order to communicate with each other within public space. Yeah. And this weird, I also don't have time for this, but you can Google it or check it online. Tamagotchi Extreme for Museum Wacom in Japan. Liquid space, a sort of space which physically becomes bigger and smaller, filled with little mechanisms when you're standing underneath it, placed here in the forest. And more and more public space projects here for a healthcare, youth therapy healthcare center in Breda, also Netherlands, where little children from 6 to 12 years live, who have psychological problems for whatever type of reason, autism, things like that. They moved from a great farm area to this incredibly generic concrete building, which might as well could have been a hospital or an insurance company. And the director realized that, and they contacted us to do something about it, quote unquote. That was our briefing. So we started making these sort of pillars of light, which based on touch or embracing would give feedback in terms of sound and light. Children started to treat it as a body. They would rather interact with the objects than actually with the therapy people. And they are placed, scattered around the building in the corridors, and they treat it like their friend.
Toyota are sponsors of green design.
Every time we take a step, we leave energy behind. What if we could capture this energy as a clean source of electricity? Dutch architects Daan are developing the technology to capture the energy of dancers like these, then using it to power the club's music and lights. Certain materials produce electricity when squeezed. This is known as the piezo effect. So a dance floor can become one big generator, turning every movement into new power. In fact, any vibrations we make can generate electricity. Even the rattle of the tram taking you home at the end of the night.
Green design, sponsored by Toyota.
Yes. When you talk about sustainability, that's, we talked about it today, that's sort of the horror of words. The more you use them, the less meaning they sometimes get. Interactivity and sustainability are a part of that. A lot of it is retro-minded, so more grass or solar panels or stuff like that. We thought it would be interesting to sort of not so much go in that way, but actually see what kind of existing actions are already out there, and to sort of plug into that and enhance that. In the same way Maastunnel or the GGZ project, the Autism Children project, try to make a new connection. So this is the concept of saying, okay, we have clubbing world, not particularly the most sustainable environment in terms of waste and things like that in the world. But what they do is dance a lot. Coming up with the idea to produce a floor which generates electricity, which consists actually out of sort of a harvesting, energy harvesting part, which is on your bicycle, dynamo, very flat, and it's sort of an interface style made of mirrors and low energy LEDs, and they together combined are one of these tiles, and built the first dance floor actually where each module, 65 or 65 centimeters, produces between 20-25 watts. Physically, and the tile itself uses 1 watt more or less, which allows us actually a lot of leftover electricity which we could use for DJ booth or lighting or some kind of energy meter to show how much you're dancing. And I thought that was sort of interesting to talk about sustainability, not in saying don't do this or don't do that, but in activation. Actually, the more you dance, the more energy you produce, which you're doing anyway. And we try to push that actually to a more radical statement, such as making this sort of green dot at the ghost, that's how we call it, which goes to the area where the most energy is produced, where the people dance the most. And that sort of became a gamish element within the floor. People try to dance and try to get the ghost, and therefore they danced more, created more energy, which gave us more modes of interactivity. So you create this relational network between DJ, dancers and architectural element floor. And we worked, of course, the general description of a floor is that it's flat. So design-wise, you cannot do so much with that. But we worked actually on a very old principle, which is used in cinema, the repoussoir effect, creating depth without actually being there, working with mirrors and LEDs. So the more you dance, the brighter the LEDs become and change in color. You get these sort of holes in the ground, visually speaking, which indicates the amount that you are charging. And you don't want to come up with fact sheets, but you want to combine innovation and experience with each other. And this is right now, we built the first one. It became a separate company, and it's traveling around the world with USA and applying it now more to metro station and clubs. But I think an interesting, on one hand it's an invention, it wasn't there before, we were the first, but on the other hand you plug into a sort of proactive architecture and connect with an audience which before that never happened. It was the periphery. And maybe I'm fascinated with that and sort of copy-morphing that idea. That's also the value of our studio, that we never stick to one idea long enough, because we get bored quite easily. I was sitting in the highway with my car. I was driving on the highway, the same in a way the Jakarta movie I just showed. And I thought it was weird that when we talk about landscape architecture and design and things like that, we always talk about buildings and trees and stuff like that. But the roads, especially in the Netherlands, it's €1 billion industry. Yeah? Incredible amounts of money are spent on it. But I think the designer or architect is more or less absent in that discipline. So we came up with the idea actually to what if we would make this road more proactive, more interactive, or less bad, so more sustainable, and start doing research actually in what has been done already within that typology, within that field. And we figured out that there were a lot of universities actually doing research in it, but it was hidden in a drawer or stick to a fact sheet. Like putting piezo in areas where you brake and you give gas, so the pressure generates electricity around stopping lights, or like getting electricity from the water from grass, which you can transfer into electricity to make energy neutral lighting via putting induction grids in the road, so you can make some kind of priority lane for electrical cars that while you're driving over it, it's actually charging. From lighting that is with you where you are, which goes the exact right speed in terms of sustainability, from digging holes in a specific way. And when you talk about sound holes, usually there are huge hardware type of things, but sound, especially low frequencies, are low things. So what this test, and it's actually working here now, the low sub-frequencies fall, so to speak, into the hole and being pitched upwards. Therefore the sound goes up and disappears. You don't need any sub-construction, etc., 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 etc. What we did was, this is a typically self-commissioned project. There was no client, there was no desire. We were not experts at that moment. But what I did was give lectures, make artist impressions. It was published in newspapers. And then one day, the director of Heijmans, one of the biggest road manufacturers in Europe, called me on my mobile phone and asked the typical question every client will ask you: how much? Which is a good question, I think. So we teamed up with them. That was the beginning of the project, Dutch newspaper. And I think this is one of the directors of Heijmans on the right. This, I think, is sort of fascinating, that the designer or the architect of today, in my opinion, should be this half priest, half entrepreneur. On one hand, you have an ideology, you have a vision, you have an imagination. But on the other hand, you have the will to realize, to hack, to update, and to make new connections. And I think this is actually, the West Side Story that design or architecture should create. Two gangs who don't belong to each other. A conservative, very good, but conservative road manufacturer, and a sort of young, creative, hybrid, whatever you want to tag it. But they fell in love with the desire to innovate the landscape, the Dutch landscape. And right now we're actually working on the first pilots and with the goal to have this first road, first 500 meter, 1 kilometer ready within the first 12 months. Yeah. And I'm convincing them now that they should spend 1% of their budget, which is a lot, into some kind of lab for mobility and landscape architecture design. And as you can see, he is still thinking about that. Yeah. So self-commissioning is a huge part of running a creative studio, because the client is stupid. The client wants June in color, which you probably, if you're good, do not want. So you have to create your own little niche in that, otherwise you're doomed, and you become a cliche of yourself. I became fascinated with this idea of skins, of interactive layers, either if it's a dance floor or a road or a wall or something that you can wear. And we were teaming up actually for a large architectural facade with a manufacturer of electronic paper, flexible displays. And I was in their lab and something was laying in the corner somewhere with dust on it, and I asked, what is that? And they said, yeah, well, that's not really interesting because we're interested in letters and resolution and color, and the only thing that this material does is change from white to transparent. So we bought everything from them. And we started, besides the architectural project, which still is a 3 to 5 year slow bureaucratic process, we started to hack a scene which we were completely unfamiliar with at that time, which was fashion. Making dresses which actually, well, you can see, change in transparency according to how intimate you are with that person. So here you see when you touch the dress, it breathes in transparency. Here it's connected to the heartbeat of the model. So the more excited she becomes, the more, well, yeah, okay, you have the imagination. Yeah. And I'll show it one more time. So I think it's interesting what happens when tech jumps out of the screen. How can we, in a time where everybody is looking at this bloody iPhone the whole day, they sort of click, how can we sort of make things more tactile again and maybe more human in the world of today? So these were the first prototypes. The white one going from white to transparent, teamed up with some great young fashion designers, developed the technology. So this is the white one, and this is the black going from black to transparent. And also here, a lot of yes but, ja maar comments from clients and manufacturers. We wanted to push the material much further, and the manufacturer was only interested in how many kilometers do you want from that stuff, which was of course not relevant at that time. So what we did was actually make these first 2 dresses ourselves from samples that we got from them. Spent some time on it. It was picked up by the designs and the wallpapers, went viral in no time, and then suddenly the director of the material manufacturer called me again on my mobile and said, my wife saw the project online and she loves it, so now we have to work together. So it was again. You learn. I think you learn greatly how to think and how to be strategic and disciplined and everything. But I can tell you that keep that up because it is important for the architectural discourse. But reality can always be a bit more diverse than you can imagine, and you should embrace that. And that's part of your toolkit. From asking a grant to robbing old ladies on a Sunday evening to this kind of wife from the director. It's about the project in the end. So right now we're making a new series, which is also more wearable. The pieces that you just saw were more for for museums. Also connected to the heartbeat of the model, or the voice recognition, so it only reacts to your to the boyfriend of the one who's wearing it. When he says something nice, you don't want to get into a fight with. And it is this idea of second skins in a way. Yeah. And what was interesting is suddenly I became surrounded with this fashion hipsters invited to be a jury in fashion shows, which I had no. So I mean, I know a lot about art and architecture, so I had to read all this. Who is Margiela? Me not know. And that was good. It sort of forced me to move away from my regular ABC. I think architectural discourse, when I studied it, and I noticed it here as well, you build up this grammar, like typology and these kind of words which sort of float around all the time are being used in every 5 sentences. But I can assure you that 95% outside has no idea what you're talking about. So it is good to push yourself out of your comfort zone and to learn how to create a dialogue again. And if it's good enough, then your essence, your true idea or concept will survive. Yeah. And this is being made now as a limited edition. Each year we invite a new fashion company or design team or designer to make a new one. So this year will be 3.0, 4.0. And at the same time, I cannot show you this because it's still within a confidential statement, making a large architectural facade from the same type of material, copy morph that principle, to a facade of a fashion store, where actually we convinced the client to sort of hide the precious content, the expensive accessories, behind a completely black wall, where actually you have to make an effort to see what's inside. So when you enter and interact with it, then it sort of becomes transparent. You can look inside, which for the first meeting with marketing managers was the same as a sort of a silent car alarm. Like, why would you do that? But for us, it was important to sort of this play of hiding and showing and making this connection between how you behave and how reality looks like. Yeah, what can I say? Huge. I was called at 2 o'clock. I get weird, I have to admit, I get weird calls. Big riot in India where without us, we didn't know it. They interviewed all these Bollywood actresses and superstars. Like there's this dress which becomes transparent. What do you think of it? And some said it's disgrace and exploitation of female body, although it was actually designed with female designers. But anyway, and others say no, it's interesting. It creates new types of dialogue. And I think that's what sort of maybe the goal of this project. To think about what do we want from technology, but what does technology want from us, and how far do we want to push it? Yeah. So talking about the architectural skins, let's go back to the field we're talking about. Kuala Lumpur, where the green scaffolding, the word public green is more related to these kind of scenarios than the actual parks in the city. Or here in Jakarta, where glass is either expensive or hard to get, where they perforate the walls in a sort of air conditioning, climate control, and at the same time it creates these sort of filters to see reality, which I found pretty beautiful. This is in a really cheap hospital somewhere in the outskirts. And taking that concept. This is me working. So, how can we make architecture more connected to everything I just said? And how can we merge nature and technology without going into the Jean Nouvel horror of 50,000 little mechanisms somewhere in Paris, which never work? So how can we make truly interactive facades beyond the RGB bling bling? LEDs and things like that. What you see here is Lotus, actually based on a very simple natural principle that everything that heats or get cold expands or shrinks. Our body does it, this wood does it, this building does it. It's a natural principle which has been around from day one we walked on planet Earth. And Lotus actually does this. So there are little layers of mylar which we made, glued on top of each other, which we stole from NASA. According to the heat of your breath, the 37 degrees, they have a different, extraction level, uitzettingscoefficient, and therefore fold open. But they are very thin, and they are very little, they are very light. And started to make these kind of walls out of it. This is the first artwork currently being shown in Paris. Based on the heat of your hand and a little lamp inside, it goes from open to closed. I'll show you a short movie about the piece. So, where you are, the light comes towards you. it's a good thing, because also here it's not so much about how it looks like, but more about it behaves. I think when you talk about design, and proactive design or interactive or responsive or whatever you want to tag it, it is interesting to talk about behavior in a way. So it's not so much about the color of the girl's lipstick, it's about if she can kiss or not. So it's about how you perform. And that becomes interesting when you use tech and design for that. And right now, teaming up with the large architectural firm in the Netherlands to copy more of the same principle to our architectural facade, teaming up also with Saint-Gobain, and putting the outside actually in a glass layer. The inside you can still touch. This is the first render we just worked on, where one part is actually interactive to the area where people are, reacting to the motion or touch, and other parts are more responsive to the sunlight, so it works the other way around. And what we're doing now, which is actually working, is playing with different thicknesses of the material, so that when the sun hits it, some parts will fold open earlier than others, so you get some kind of no-tech animated surface. Suddenly the building starts to behave like nature more, which you can do in a functional way, to about heat and cold or climate control, but also about hiding and showing certain areas, or just to make it connect again. Oh yeah, this is Bjarne Masterbroek, the architect we're working with from Search, a good friend of Rem, playing with one of the samples based on the heat of his hand, like a Borg. And working now on upscaling this idea on a more dome-like structure. We have the Pantheon in Rome, which has one big hole in the middle. God is above. Well, now everyone is God. So making actually a dome which folds open on different kind of spots. To play with this notion of light and shadow. Last project I want to talk about. This is a commissioned thing for an area which is in Eindhoven, in the old area where the lamp factories were. It's holy ground. That's where the light bulb was produced. Einstein presented there the first CD-ROM. Philips left, and that area actually became empty and is now renovated by a property developer for housing, for hippies and yuppies. And they invited us actually to make a new plan for lighting, but in such a way that it was not just about functionality, but also more about social media. How can you make a connection between how people experience their environment and how can you make them a part of it? So when you look at the evolution of light, in a way it's quite weird, because in the beginning light was already personalized. You would get a candle and you would walk around it in the Middle Ages. So the light was always already with you, it was a part of your environment. And then suddenly it became more industrialized, and we got these pillars and more street lighting. And the LED sort of, in 1962, helped us actually to become cheaper, more energy efficient, no heat, etc., more compact, more embedded. And we thought, okay, what, with all the ambitious thoughts we have in our brain, what could be next level within that? So we started to look in a way, again, this nature thing, salt crystals, which had a specific type of chemistry. When you put them in a substance, they start to grow in perfectly geometrical shape. This is a natural process. You don't design it. It's just the way, the substance that you use in a way. That's how you design it, but the form finds its own way. And we start putting actually an LED in this little lamp, in this little crystal. So the crystal grows around the LED, and making a sort of small thin layer of mat, which produces a little low energy field of electricity, wireless power, wireless magnetism. And that sort of allowed us to create these little rocks which charge up wirelessly the moment you walk over it, without any battery. Your environment, the ground becomes alive. So you can walk over it and it follows you. Or there are more dramatic And when nobody is there, it's sort of idle glowing to keep the minimum amount of necessary light in terms of safety possible. And of course, the good thing about this is that the crystals are laying loose on the ground. So the good thing is that people can pick them up and do whatever they want with it. And the bad thing is that people can pick them up and do whatever they want with it. So we had to come, but we didn't want to glue them because it would kill the idea. So we convinced the client that this is part actually of the authenticity of the project, which they accepted. 2 reasons. One is that it creates a whole new, let's use the word typology, or a diversity of use, that we can create little rocks which we use for letters, bigger rocks for more iconic areas. So suddenly the landscape becomes sort of morphable. Plus that we provide the maintenance contract that we have a webcam so we can detect how many crystals are stolen. And the crystals that you have only work in relation to that foundation. So if you take it home, it's useless. And we provide, the rocks are quite cheap to make, provide enough amount so that there's always enough light. And you can put them on different surfaces, either on a rubber or in grass or in stone pavement, etc. And every person who will buy a house there will get this sort of goodie bag with a lot of crystals. We will make the technology open source, so you can make your own crystals online in terms of shape. So you can give it to your girlfriend and then like sort of share the light. And I mean, that's what I noticed with June, that the copycats are everywhere. So the replicas, the duplicates. So we might as well do it ourselves and do the merchandising as well. Yeah. So to conclude, if you want to know more about these things, there's a big book published, The Interactive Landscape, with a lot of essays and more thoughts for think thoughts in English. If you don't want to buy or read, you can download everything here for free from the website, all the movies and images. But to conclude, I'm using this image for this because we are not architects, I think. I think we are hybrids. And how I should, I think, illustrate that is this image with, when I was traveling in India, is a story that was told by me, by an architectural student in Mumbai. The story of a tiger which had little puppies, and the puppies died when they were born. And the tiger in India, seen as a precious animal, got very depressed, didn't want to eat, and the caretakers were very upset by that. So they thought of a trick, like, okay, we don't want the tiger to die, what do we do? So they got 5 little piggies, and they wrapped actually the skin of these dead puppies around the piggies, and they were accepted. They were not eaten, they were accepted. And right now they live happily together. And I think this is us. This is us. We should be hybrids. We should be this half priest, half entrepreneur. We should design the missing link between beauty and bullshit, between creativity and commerce, between ideology and technology. And in that way, it's not so much a technology-driven thing, it's more an ideology thing. We should, in a way, be ready to update reality. Yeah. Okay, that's it. Johan, are you the tiger or the piggy? Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Me too. Yeah. Okay. Questions? Yeah, please. Yeah.
Who were your clients? You said your clients approached you. It's all the rest projects. You said, yeah, they came from it and
Well, in the beginning, it's still 50% is art, art world, museum world, private collectors. More and more public space, so governments, cities want to enhance their life. But also more and more these sort of companies which usually would not connect with us, like the road manufacturer or a big fashion chain. And I think that's interesting. I mean, we're working now with ESA, the European NASA, to make something out there. They come to us because we have this mix of innovation and experience. And the architectural facades are more also from property developers or architectural firms who want to work with us, like an OMA or things like that. Yeah. But it's very diverse. Yeah. That's actually how we like it. But you're right. I think I mean the first 2 years you're completely broke. Eh? I mean you just work incredibly hard and everybody likes it, but nobody is willing to engage in that way. So June, the permanent June that I showed you, that the city wanted to purchase it, was sort of our momentum. And I think every young firm has this. And from that, it started to run much more. Yeah. So my job is to sort of select what we do or what we don't do when it becomes decorative, and when it really changes something. Yeah. And if you do that consequently, then you create some kind of value. And the notion of full package. So we do from vision to shipping crate to maintenance contract. I think with an architectural setting, I am aware that this is quite difficult. But you see much more architects, especially in China, foreign architects, who team up with a construction company and say, okay, we do everything to the client. And it gives them freedom, and at the same time this authentic thing again, which maybe the architect lost a long time ago.
How do you separate art from architecture?
Do I do that? Yeah, I mean, let's leave the tags to the art critics when I die. I'm interested in updating and applying. Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, we do the white cubes, which is good and interesting, but I'm a fan of these roads that we're working on. You change the mental map of ourselves, of the studio, of these people. So you go to the periphery where nobody actually went. Yeah. Again, we're hybrids. So you're a hybrid. Yeah.
Just a question about, well, lots of questions that can come in the course, but the first few projects were very much like interactive mirrors.
Sorry, interactive?
Interactive mirrors.
Yeah.
Where you perform an action and there's sort of rather immediate response. And later on, especially with the salt crystals, you perceive the transition to...
Yeah, it becomes more programmatic in a way. Yeah.
Was this transition conscious?
Yeah. Well, even in the first pieces, even with the June Maas tunnel, it was half mirror, half display. So on one hand, it was reacting to what you're doing, which is quite immediate. But on the other hand, it still has a mind of its own. So it's really depending on how many people there are, or if you make a specific sound, for example, June will recognize this and filter it away. So it will be less responsive to that. So it's made, there are sort of layers and layers and layers of software code.
So you actively fight this monkey in front of a mirror interaction design.
Yeah, I think it's necessary. Yeah? What you talk about is generic specific. Some part has to be specific, otherwise people don't connect to it. Yeah, it could have been an animation. But at the same time, yeah, if it's too specific, you might as well just put a mirror there with a free M filter over it. So it becomes interesting when you get this play of co-control between man and machine, but also between man and man in a way, or person and person. So for me, the interactivity is not so much happening in a microchip, but more in the brains of the people. People really think like that some of our artworks read their aura, you know? And like I'm there, and then they're talking, how does it work? And yeah, it's spiritual, it reads your aura.